Hey guys, tonight we're going way back like pre-Zeus, pre-hero, pre-everything back. You're lying in the grass of a grove that smells faintly of fennel and old thunder, where the sunlight plays peekaboo through ancient fig trees. The air is thick with slow-drifting pollen and something else, softer. It isn't birdsong or wind, it's a whisper, faint, reptilian. You tilt your head, and yes, the grass is whispering back. In hiss. You try to sit up, but why bother? The grove has you now. You're deep in the sleep side of myth, the realm of the Titans, those primordial forces that shaped the universe before the drama-prone Olympians took over. And among them, one Titan who didn't throw lightning or wrestle mountains. One whose only gift was the whisper. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps more than you know. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're lying beneath the lowest bough of an olive tree older than empires, and your guide isn't Hermes or Hera or any of the usual suspects. Tonight, it's someone mostly forgotten his name, lost in translation, perhaps never spoken aloud again. A Titan whose tongue favored the language of snakes. Not a metaphor. He literally spoke to snakes. In a world where thunder was applause and strength meant volume, he chose quietude. He was a sibling who never fought in the Titanomachy, the great war between gods and their predecessors. Historians, and by historians, I mean ancient poets with a flair for editing, mostly omit him. Why? Because he didn't fit the story arc. He didn't rage. He didn't defy. He whispered. But here, in this sunlit grove outside of time, he lingers. You feel it in the gentle hum beneath the soil. There's a serpent coiled near your ankle, but you don't startle. It just blinks slowly, as if waiting for you to continue. This Titan, let's call him Ophion, though it's more placeholder than biography, was said to walk with bare feet that never crushed a twig. His domain, not the sky or sea or underworld, just this grove's glades and all the places where snakes nest without notice. You imagine him now, pale robes dragging through wild garlic, long fingers brushing mossy rocks as serpents slither ahead of him, clearing a path. He didn't speak often, but when he did, the words weren't heard, they were felt, tickling the spine, like the first chill before a dream. Now, here's the mainstream fact. The name Ophion does appear in some fragments of Orphic myth. A Titan sometimes credited with ruling the heavens before Cronus. But in most tales, he's quickly dethroned, replaced, forgotten. Historians still argue whether Ophion was a real mythological figure or just a poetic shadow meant to fill a narrative gap. But the snakes remember. You reach out to touch the serpent near you, it doesn't flinch. Instead, it nudges forward, tongue flickering in a slow, rhythmic beat. It's telling you something, not in words, but in pulses. It speaks like wind through reeds. You don't translate it exactly, you receive it. And it's telling you the story of its master. This Titan didn't build temples. He didn't sit on golden thrones. He lived in forgotten corners, shaded grottos where sunlight couldn't fully commit. He taught snakes not just to listen, but to remember. That's how his myth endured, not in marble, in muscle memory, in scaled skin. And here comes your first quirky tidbit. According to one fringe Alexandrian papyrus, now mostly ash, there existed a ritual called the Serpent's Repose, in which priestesses lay silently beside snakes for hours, hoping to catch echoes of the Titan's last words. No one wrote them down. That was part of the deal. So why did he matter? Because in a world of shouts, whispers are radical. And Ophion's whispers shaped the small, slow-moving parts of history. The stories that never made it into Homer or Hesiod. The healing words spoken in quiet before war. The lullabies muttered into reeds before sailing into unknown seas. The truths murmured by servants behind palace curtains. You lie still now. The serpent has curled beside you, its body cool against your arm. Somewhere nearby another whisper stirs the grass. You can't hear it. Not yet. But soon you'll understand. That's how it begins. Not with thunder, but with a hiss. The grove blurs behind you as your feet begin to move, though you don't remember standing. You're following something soft. Not footsteps, not a trail. A vibration, perhaps. A rhythm. It leads you deeper into memory through layers of myth and moss until the trees thin out and reveal a different world altogether. You arrive in a world before stories were bound in leather or etched into marble. Before temples, before statues, before even the idea of worship. This is the world before the gods. Not lawless, just unscripted. You walk alongside the Titans now. Towering strange, neither good nor evil, just old. Their movements shift the landscape not out of malice, but as a side effect of their size. One brushes against a mountain and accidentally creates a valley. Another sighs and clouds form out of the mist in their breath. Among them is Ophion, not louder, not brighter, just there. The other Titans thunder and roar. Oceanus splashes continents into shape. Hyperion ignites the sky. Even Gaia, the earth herself, seems to rumble beneath her own weight. But Ophion, he lingers near the edges, never central, always coiled around something small, Pebble's root sometimes a sleeping animal. When he speaks, it's not with lungs, but with intention. He doesn't bellow his power. He embeds it into soil, into bark, into things that seem trivial. Historians still argue whether Ophion was merely a metaphor for entropy, a poetic stand-in for the silence that precedes creation. But here he's real. You can see him tall and lean, his robe stitched with serpent scales, his eyes cloudy like opals. He hums, and the snakes come slithering like tributaries to a sea. They don't crawl over each other. They align. They arrive. This is how the early world learned to listen. Not through decree, through observation. You pause beside a brook that flows uphill because gravity hasn't been decided yet, and watch Ophion bend low to the water. He dips a hand. A snake coils around his arm, hissing into his ear. He nods. Here's your mainstream historical fact for the night. Long before Olympian myths dominated, there existed proto-mythologies in various Greek regions that elevated chthonic or underworld-aligned deities. Serpents were commonly linked to earth wisdom renewal and the cycle of death and rebirth. Even Athena carried a snake-twined staff in her early iconography. Serpents weren't evil, they were wise. But Ophion didn't just respect them, he conversed with them. Imagine being a titan among titans, and instead of creating stars, you invent communication. Not flashy, not immediate, but deep, lasting. You teach creatures without voices how to share truths. And now, the fringe tidbit. Some scholars from the 1st century BCE mention a lost cult in Boeotia that worshipped a figure they called the root-tongued one. His symbol, a serpent encircling a stone, not biting it, protecting it. Some suspect this was an echo of Ophion, but nothing conclusive remains. Just etchings, just guesses. You sit beside him now. You try to ask a question, but your voice doesn't work. Instead, you look down at the grass. A snake passes slow and smooth, brushing your toe with the barest flick of contact. You understand. In the age before stories, there was understanding without explanation, harmony without doctrine. Ophion's world wasn't one of commandments, it was one of consent. The snakes came to him not because they were compelled, but because they were curious. You lie back, your head cradled by moss, your body warm from the filtered sun. Above you, a tree blooms for no reason. A snake slithers along its branch. It hisses once, and the flower opens. You don't know what it means, but it makes sense. In this time, before time, creation is soft. You can't tell where the world ends and the myth begins. Ophion walks beside you silent, but you feel his presence the way you feel your heartbeat in your fingertips. Not everything has to be loud to be real. Not everything has to be remembered to matter. You wake, or maybe you never slept in a different clearing. The sunlight has shifted thick and golden now, as if it's been infused with honey. The air hums with midsummer heat, and you hear the soft rustle of scales brushing bark. It's not threatening. It's deliberate, like someone gently turning the page of a heavy book. Ophion is here again. He's seated on a rock that glistens like obsidian but pulses faintly like a living thing. Around him, snakes gather, not in chaos but in alignment. You realize you've stumbled into a lesson, a quiet one. No blackboard, no altar. Just a titan and his students all scaled, coiled, and listening. Tonight's focus, a gift. Or maybe a curse. A talent so specific and so strange that even other titans gave it a sideways glance. Ophion could whisper to snakes, and they whispered back. You tilt your head, hoping for clarification. Why snakes? Why not birds or bears or something with eyebrows? But snakes were special. They had no limbs, no eyelids, no fixed voice. They moved like thoughts, coiled like secrets, and shed their skin as if unbothered by identity. They were the ideal confidants for a titan who preferred suggestion over speech. You sit cross-legged trying to hear what Ophion hears. The snakes flick their tongues syncopated like jazz. It's not quite language, but it's rich with intention. You can't translate it, but you can feel it an undercurrent of memory and caution and cyclical wisdom. Here's your mainstream historical anchor. In many ancient cultures, especially in Mesopotamia and early Anatolia, snakes were associated with healing wisdom and divine knowledge. The Greek god Asclepius, god of medicine, famously carried a rod entwined with a serpent. Even today, that symbol lives on in medical emblems across the world. But before Asclepius, before temples and Hippocratic oaths, there was Ophion. And he wasn't healing the body, he was tending the silence. The snakes didn't just carry messages. They stored them like tape recorders with scales. Stories too dangerous to write, emotions too subtle for song. If you whispered a truth into the mouth of a snake, it wouldn't gossip. It would coil the secret within itself and carry it until it was needed again. Maybe centuries later, maybe tonight. Historians still argue whether this Titan whispers to snakes motif originated as metaphor, perhaps referring to the silent way underground knowledge spreads, or whether it reflects a real fragment of a lost cultic practice. But here, under this golden sun and rattling hush metaphor feels irrelevant. The truth is crawling across your sandals. Ophion stretches out a hand, and one snake rises to meet it like smoke made solid. They exchange a hiss, a short one, followed by 3 rhythmic pulses. Ophion nods. You blink. just for a moment. When your eyes open, the snake is wrapped around your wrist. Don't panic. It's not tight. It's comforting, like a weighted bracelet with a pulse. You hear something. Not out loud, not in your ear. It's in your chest. The snake is telling you a story. One you didn't know you knew. About a child who could hear plants breathe. About a mountain that sang to its own stones. About a titan who whispered those things into being. And here's your quirky tidbit. In the village of Kami, on the island of Euboea, there's a ruined shrine with no name. Locals claim that if you sleep beside the moss-covered altar, you'll dream in serpents. You'll wake up remembering nothing except a whisper that stays with you for days. No one's written it down. No one can. It only works if you forget it slowly. You stroke the snake gently. Its tongue brushes your knuckle, and for a second you think it laughs. Not like a joke, like recognition. Ophion doesn't smile exactly, but there's a shift in the air around him. Approval. You've listened. Not with your ears, but with your stillness. The lesson ends without a bell. The snakes retreat into the underbrush, their bodies drawing lines in the dirt that form no alphabet, just intention. You remain seated, wrist warm, where the snake touched you. Somewhere deep inside, you've learned something. It might surface in a dream, or not. But it's yours now. The Titan doesn't speak. He never really does. But he nods once, then turns away, robe trailing behind him like mist. And where he walks, the grass leans forward as if listening. The scene softens around you, less grove, more twilight now. The light fades, not because the sun sets, but because this memory was never meant to be bright. You're following Ophion again, though following feels too deliberate a word. You drift behind him as though carried by the wake of a dream. He walks without urgency as always. The snakes do not slither around his feet now. They guide him, little flickers of movement just ahead, clearing a path through the dry ferns. You step where they step, almost without thinking. There's no trail, just agreement. No orders, just understanding. You arrive in a place shaped like a question, a half-circle of stones, long since sunken into the earth, and a quiet altar cracked by roots. Here you begin to understand the why of Ophion. Why snakes? Why whispers? Why not a thunderbolt or a golden chariot? Because power in Ophion's world isn't about spectacle. It's about survival. And snakes, oh, they know survival. Cold-blooded, quiet, never blinking. In Greek, thought they were paradoxes, both protectors and tricksters, symbols of rebirth and deception. Aeschylus wrote of them as omens. Hesiod tucked them into cautionary tales. But for Ophion, they weren't props or signs. They were partners. You sit beside the altar, and the wind rustles through dry grass like a chorus of sighs. You start to see a pattern, a coiled motif carved into every stone, worn smooth by centuries, but still faintly visible. Each coil touches another, as if the stones themselves are telling you connection is the point. Not hierarchy, not domination, just quiet linkages, things winding into each other. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In early Greek mystery cults, especially Orphic and Dionysian traditions, snakes were used in initiation rituals. Some rites involved lying in darkness, while snakes crawled over your body believed to impart secret knowledge or rebirth through fear and stillness. Now, picture Ophion watching from the shadows, not as a deity to be worshipped, but as a presence to be felt. He wouldn't demand loyalty. He would teach patience. In a world full of shrines to booming gods, his gift was subtlety. And now for your fringe tidbit. There's an obscure inscription in the ruins of Delos written in Linear B, but translated much later, that includes a reference to a speaker of the hiss. Most scholars dismiss it as metaphor or even mistranslation, but a few romantics believe it was a veiled reference to Ophion tucked inside a list of household offerings, as if he'd been remembered in groceries rather than hymns. You run your fingers along one of the altar stones. It's warm, not from the sun, but from something older. Your fingertips settle into one of the carved coils. It fits perfectly, as if it waited millennia for your hand. You hear them again. The snakes. Their hissing is low-layered like a faraway storm that's decided to whisper instead of roar. You lean in. You listen. It's a story, but not told like a human would. It starts in the middle curls back to the beginning, then slides forward again. It's the story of how the world tried to forget Ophion, not with violence, but with noise. The rise of louder gods, flashier myths, better branding. Zeus and his siblings brought law, war, lightning, spectacle. Ophion offered nuance. That didn't sell. Not in temples, not in legends. Historians still argue whether Ophion was left out deliberately or simply didn't survive the oral editing process. There's no scroll that says this guy was too quiet, so we cut him. But myth has always favored the bold. And so Ophion faded. Not dramatically, just gently, like steam slipping out of a cracked door. You lie back against the stone, now head resting in the coil's groove. A snake slithers nearby but does not touch you. It doesn't need to. You've heard what it came to say. Above stars begin to appear tiny pinpricks of memory poking through myth's tapestry. One of them pulses faintly green. You wonder if it's Ophion's. Not a constellation, just a soft glimmer. Easy to miss, but it's there. That's the thing about the Titan of Whispers. You never really see him coming, and you never quite forget him even if no one writes him down. You wake, though it feels more like changing channels in your mind. The sky's different now, a dusky lavender, and the trees have been replaced by stone. You're walking up a steep path lined with broken columns and creeping ivy toward a cave mouth dark enough to swallow the day. It smells of ash and sage and something else, something scaly. The snakes are already here. Not threatening, just present. Coiled in the cracks between steps, their scales gleam like wet coins in the last light. They do not hiss at you. They watch. You're expected. You duck into the cave. The air cools immediately. Every sound dampens your footsteps, your breath, even your thoughts. And at the end of the tunnel, lit by a faint blue glow from phosphorescent minerals in the rock, she waits. A girl, young maybe, or just timeless. She sits cross-legged on a flat slab, hair tangled like ivy vines, a snake wrapped lazily around her shoulders like a scarf that chose her. She doesn't speak, neither do you. You sit opposite her. The snake on her shoulders lifts its head tongue, flicking once. You've arrived at the first oracle. Before Delphi. Before Apollo staked his claim. Before priesthoods and temple donations and riddles wrapped in poetry. This was it, girl, cave snake, silence. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Oracle of Delphi, most famous in Greek history, was originally a site sacred to Gaia and associated with a serpent named Python. Apollo only took it over later, slaying Python in myth to claim the sanctuary. But whispers of an earlier, quieter serpent oracle persist. This cave. It might be a memory of that earlier age, a time when prophecies came not in booming voices, but in murmurs, hisses, and dreams. The girl, let's call her Myrene, though no one ever recorded her name learned from Ophion himself. Not through language, through presence. He never told her what to say. He let her listen. The snakes brought her stories, pulses, forgotten names. She didn't interpret them. She just relayed. You watch her now. Her lips part slightly, and you expect words. But instead, the snake hisses gently. 3 short bursts, 1 long. She nods. She turns to you. Finally, her eyes don't quite focus on yours. They look through you like stained glass catching light. You carry a silence, she says. It's not a compliment. Not an accusation either. It's just an observation. And she's right. You have carried silence. Maybe all your life. The things you didn't say. The thoughts you buried because they didn't fit into polite conversation. The dreams that felt too small to matter. This is where those things come to rest. In Ophion's cave. With Myrene and the snake. She reaches out a hand, and the snake slips down her arm to yours. Again, it coils not tight, just present. Like it's remembering you. Now for your quirky tidbit. In a 2nd century text attributed to an obscure Alexandrian mystic named Heracleon the Lesser, there's mention of a Hys priestess who slept beside serpents and offered wordless divinations through rhythmic breath. It's one of the few non-Apollonian sources that hint at an earlier feminine snake-guided tradition of prophecy. You exhale slowly, matching the snake's rhythm. Myrene does the same. It becomes a pattern, a lullaby of breath and scale and memory. No one comes here anymore. Not since the temples went marble and the gods started taking PR seriously. But the cave hasn't forgotten. Neither has the snake. Myrene stands the cave light catching in her hair like soft fire. She says nothing else, just turns, walks deeper into the stone, and vanishes. The snake doesn't follow, it stays with you. You lie down on the stone slab, feeling it warm beneath you impossibly. The cave breathes. The snake coils beside your neck, not threatening, just waiting. You don't need to ask questions. You already know the answers. Ophion trained the first oracle not to speak, but to feel. And in her silence, the world once found truth. You emerge from the cave slowly as if passing through centuries instead of stone. The air feels different now, charged, yes, but brittle. The golden hush of earlier has given way to a sky the color of burned parchment. The trees lean inward, eavesdropping. You feel it before you see it, the gods are near. Not the Titans, not Ophion. These are the new ones, younger, brasher, louder. Their presence buzzes beneath your skin like being too close to a speaker turned up too high. And then you see him, Zeus. He stands at the center of a glade where the grass refuses to grow, surrounded by lightning scars etched into the soil. His beard is far too sculpted, his posture effortlessly dramatic, like he knows this will be painted later. The other gods stand just behind Hera with narrowed eyes, Apollo bored and sun-dazzled, Ares already flexing. Ophion is here too, off to the side naturally, uninvited but not unnoticed. A few snakes shift at his feet. He doesn't bow. He never does. This is the council where it happened. The one they never wrote about. The one too awkward to preserve in poetry. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Most Greek myth structures the rise of the Olympians as a kind of generational overthrow, a cosmic coup, where Cronus is dethroned by Zeus. But what's often skipped is the fate of titans who didn't fight. Those who didn't oppose Zeus, but also didn't worship him. Ophion fell into that category. He didn't rebel, he didn't praise, he simply kept whispering. And Zeus hated that, not because it was wrong, but because it was unclear. and ambiguity to a god who demands thunderous clarity is practically treason. The gods speak in declarations, in rules and punishments and laurels, but Ophion spoke in implications, in ifs, in maybes, in hush. Historians still argue whether there's any source that directly mentions Ophion's banishment. Some point to Hesiod's peculiar omission of certain titans suggesting deliberate erasure. Others claim that whispering figures were folded into the concept of chaos and forgotten not out of spite, but out of narrative necessity. You can't build temples to suggestion. You stand now, hidden behind a cypress, watching this council unfold. Zeus doesn't yell. That's the strangest part. He doesn't have to. He simply gestures, and with a glance, a divine one, sharp and final Ophion is dismissed. No lightning, no chains, just excluded. The gods turn their backs, but it stings anyway. Ophion doesn't protest. He simply turns robe trailing behind him like memory. The snakes follow a silent procession of reverence. You step quietly after him. No one stops you. You're not loud enough to notice. Now, your quirky tidbit. In a nearly forgotten Delphic fragment attributed to the oracle Themisto, there's mention of a silent one who left the halls of sky not by sword, but sigh. Scholars have long debated if this was a symbolic reference to entropy or an indirect nod to someone like Ophion. Either way, the image stuck of a titan whose only crime was vagueness. You catch up to him at the edge of the glade. He stands beside a river you hadn't noticed before its water, still as glass, refusing to reflect the sky. He turns to you, finally, and his voice, a whisper of course, brings a single word into your mind, undone. You don't know what it means. Not yet. But it settles inside you like a seed. Ophion steps into the river and vanishes. No splash, no ripple, just gone. The snakes hesitate, then slither into the reeds. Some stay, some don't. You remain, your breath suddenly very loud in the silence left behind. It wasn't a war. It wasn't a punishment. It was a decision. Zeus declared the age of whispers over, and history, ever loyal to the loudest voices, agreed. But not everything listens to thunder. The river where Ophion disappeared runs beside you now. It doesn't gurgle or crash or even trickle. It hums, quietly, like a lullaby hummed under one's breath, more remembered than sung. You follow its bank, not walking so much as gliding, as if your steps have softened from proximity to a vanished god. The terrain changes. The grass grows swampy. The trees thin. Frogs call from muddy banks and dragonflies weave lazy loops overhead. This is not Olympus. This is exile. You step into the marsh of dreaming lizards. It's not a name from any myth you remember. It's not in textbooks or temple inscriptions. But the moment your foot sinks gently into the wet earth, you know. This is where Ophion went after the gods turned their backs. Not Tartarus, not revenge, just away. A lily pad trembles as something slips beneath its surface. You don't flinch. You're too far gone for that now. You spot him again, Ophion sitting on a flat stone, half submerged in the marsh. His robe is damp to the knees. His hair is loose, dotted with algae. A snake rests around his shoulders like a tired thought. A frog perches on his palm. He looks completely at peace. This, you realize, is not punishment. It's retirement. He speaks not to you, but to the marsh. You strain to hear, and suddenly the wind carries his voice so faint, so gentle, it feels like your own breath has decided to narrate. He's telling stories. To the frogs, to the reeds, to the mud, and you begin to realize this is how bedtime stories were born. not from grand epics or battlefield glory, but from whispered tales in forgotten swamps told to creatures with no calendars and no reason to doubt. Here's your mainstream historical fact. While Greek myths are often grand and poetic, much of their transmission came from oral tradition stories told in low voices around hearths or in the fields shaped not by scholars, but by those who needed to believe in something quiet and kind after a hard day. And Ophion. He didn't shout. He didn't command. He told stories that made the swamp sigh with relief. Now for the fringe tidbit, a Byzantine-era scroll written by a monk known only as Theophilos the Scribbler describes a heretical tale of a gentle Titan who walked into the mud and made Lily's dream. The church rejected the scroll as nonsense, but the imagery endured in children's lullabies on Lesbos and Chios soft verses about the whisper man in the reeds. You sit by the Titan now. He doesn't speak to you. He doesn't need to. The frogs do. One hops closer. It croaks once, then goes silent. And in that silence, a story enters your mind. A tale of a tree that refused to grow because it missed the snake who once coiled around it. Of a breeze that carried bedtime through the reeds like a secret promise. Historians still argue whether Titans had emotions like humans. But as you watch Ophion smile barely faintly like a ripple, you suspect they had something gentler, something longer. You lie back in the soft earth. The marsh accepts you instantly. The mud is warm. The reeds sway above you, sketching lullabies in the sky. Ophion continues to whisper. You're not sure if he's telling you a story or if you're becoming one. You wake if that word still applies and the sound of waves soft and regular as if the sea itself has fallen asleep. The marsh is gone and you're somewhere new. Warmer. Brighter. Salt clings to your skin like ancient memory. You're on an island. The wind carries the scent of myrrh and thyme. Bees hum lazily around wildflowers and terraced hills curve gently upward like the back of a sleeping animal. And somewhere above, faint but certain, you hear it again. Hiss. Not threatening, familiar. You walk inland, sandals crunching dry earth. The island feels alive, but not in the dramatic gods dwelling on mountains way. This life is slower, domestic, hidden. This is Lesbos, not the poetic version sung by Sappho or painted on amphorae. No, this is the older Lesbos, the one not mentioned in travel guides or myth anthologies. This is the island of the snake cult. You arrive at a courtyard shaded by fig trees, and there they are, women, dozens of them dressed in robes of undyed wool sitting in a loose circle. Some hold baskets, others serpents. They don't react to you. They're used to ghosts. Or maybe you're not the first visitor Ophion has sent their way. One woman, older, with crow's feet and a smile that feels like warm clay, waves you over. You sit. A small green snake curls around your ankle like a cat who trusts you instantly. She begins to speak not to you directly, but to the circle. Her voice is low rhythmic, a chant, a memory, hard to say. The snakes lift their heads, swaying in unison. You listen. They're telling the story of a Titan, not loud, not vengeful, who gave them dreams. Not the kind with monsters or naked chariot races. Dreams with colors that didn't exist, with words that came out shaped like coils. Dreams that whispered to them until they knew. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In certain Greek mystery cults, especially those with Orphic or Chthonic affiliations, women often played central roles as priestesses mediums or dream interpreters. Snake symbolism frequently appeared in their rituals, and some early traditions blended dream work and serpent veneration into forms of nocturnal worship. The snake cult of Lesbos, as you see it now, was never about venom or danger. It was about softness, trust, and quiet rebellion. They didn't burn cities or raise armies. They planted stories like seeds and let them grow crooked in the dark. They raised daughters who dreamed in hisses and painted serpents on the walls of wells. They taught that truth wasn't always linear or even audible. Sometimes it slithered. Now for the quirky fringe detail. There's a broken urn in the Mytilene Museum, rarely displayed, which depicts a group of women cradling snakes beneath a crescent moon. Most historians dismiss it as a fertility symbol, but one marginal scholar proposed that it references a cult once aligned with an exiled titan of silence. Her theory never made it past peer review, but the urn's snakes all have closed eyes. You lean back. One of the women hands you a pomegranate seed. You accept it. Eat it. It's tart grounding. Around the circle, a snake begins to hum. Yes, hum. Not with vocal cords, just vibration. A low, resonant sound that begins in its coils and shivers outward. The women join in voices barely above breath. It's not a song. It's a remembering. You close your eyes. And Ophion's presence returns not beside you, but inside you, like a thought that never fully unthought itself. He speaks through the hiss, through the hum, through the heartbeat of a cult that never wanted altars, only understanding. You whisper back, and the snakes listen. It's later now, or earlier, you've lost all sense of time. The island air fades around you, replaced by dry, dusty stillness. You're indoors. You smell old parchment sandalwood and that faint hint of something once burned but long since forgiven. You are in the library of Alexandria, or maybe a version of it that exists only in memory stitched together from fragments of scrolls and dreams. The ceilings loom high frescoes of stars peeling gently from the stone. Scrolls line every wall in obsessive symmetry, yet the room hums with gentle chaos. Scribes murmuring feathers, scratching parchment sandals, scuffing marble. You wander between shelves taller than most houses. They smell like every question humanity has ever asked. You're not looking for anything in particular. Or maybe you are. You find it by accident, as is the way of forgotten things. A scroll tucked behind others, smaller, older, more brittle. No title, no official seal. You unroll it slowly, careful not to breathe too hard. The ink has faded to the color of moss. It isn't a story. It's a list of metaphors. The coil around thought. The river that never flows forward. The tongue without breath. The eye that sleeps open. The titan who vanished beneath silence. You pause. There it is. No name, no backstory, just that single sleepy reference. The titan. Ophion. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Library of Alexandria was one of the most ambitious knowledge projects of the ancient world. At its peak, it may have held hundreds of thousands of scrolls, many of which are now lost. Only scattered references to their content survive in secondary texts, often cryptic and poetic. One such reference, written centuries later by the Roman geographer Pomponius Mela, describes a scroll of riddles with no authorship attributed to the snake-tongue cults of the eastern islands. It was dismissed as local superstition. But you're holding it now. Your fingers trace the ink. One line pulses faintly. Some truths do not echo. They absorb. You feel a shift in the room. The scribes glance over just once, then look away. One raises an eyebrow as if to say, "You found it already." You nod, though you don't know why. And now for your fringe tidbit. There's an obscure account from a 13th century Cairo scholar who claimed that during the sacking of the library, a monk tried to rescue a scroll containing serpent philosophy. He reportedly threw it into the sea, trusting it would swim. Scholars dismiss the story. Scrolls don't swim. Unless, of course, the Titan who whispered to snakes taught them how. You roll the scroll back up, carefully. As you do, the ink seems to settle as though grateful to be read even once. You return it to its hiding place, not out of duty, but out of instinct. Ossian's myths were never meant to be displayed. They were meant to be found by accident, like a snake in tall grass. You leave the library, no one stops you. Outside, the sky's darker now, not ominous, just velvet. The stars blink lazily. You realize Ossian has been here too. Not in the scroll, but in the silence of the scribes, in the cracks between the ink strokes, in the fact that no one mentioned him, but no one erased him either. He's the whisper behind the knowledge, the coil around the mind. And tonight, he let you read one sentence of him. You find yourself back in the city Athens, probably, but not the Athens of postcards or Plato's dialogues. This is the city as it dreams itself, dusty, humming alive with thought. The streets are quiet, the kind of quiet that only exists at night when philosophy and stray cats prowl freely. You wander through the agora. Statues watch you with blank marble eyes. Their names have been chiseled away, but they still seem smug about something. You pass a tavern where no one drinks, only debates. A fig tree leans over the alley listening in, and there, under the archway of a forgotten Stoic school, he sits, a man. Or maybe not a man. You can't quite tell. He's wrapped in a dark cloak that catches no light. His sandals are dusty. His hood is pulled low. His hands are still. He does not blink. You approach slowly. There's no fear, just recognition, as if your shadow has stepped out in front of you for once. He gestures to the stone bench beside him, and you sit. Nothing creaks, nothing rustles. The city holds its breath. He speaks not aloud, but inside your chest. A tickle in your ribs. To be unseen is not the same as to be unmade. You nod, he nods. Then he begins. Not a speech, but a sequence of statements, aphorisms, riddles. The serpent does not speak to be understood. Silence is not absence. It is shelter. The loudest truths need the least echo. He who blinks forgets. You realize he's not teaching. He's remembering, replaying lines from somewhere very, very old. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In classical Athens, philosophers often taught in public spaces, peripatetic schools, garden groves, porticos. While Socratic dialogue is the best documented, there were countless minor teachers and fringe thinkers whose names never made it to the symposiums. Some preferred anonymity-blending teachings with ritual or cryptic poetry. And now, your fringe tidbit, a fragment of an Athenian inscription refers to the cloaked one, a figure said to speak in breathless riddles and never blink. Some thought him a street prophet, others an exiled priest of an unknown cult. The entry was later crossed out and overwritten with the word irrelevant but not erased. You look at the figure beside you. He doesn't move. He doesn't blink. You speak just once. Are you Ossian? He doesn't answer, but his cloak stirs slightly, like a snake exhaling. A breeze carries his scent, not perfume, not sweat, something earthy, like dried mint crushed between ancient fingers. He stands. No fanfare, no final words, just the sound of his sandals brushing stone as he walks away. His shadow stretches oddly, too long, too curved. almost serpentine. You stay seated for a long time. Above you, an owl hoots once, then nothing. You realize the whispers haven't stopped. They've just gone inside, into your own thoughts, into the parts of your mind where forgotten truths coil quietly, waiting for soft nights like this. You don't know what he gave you, only that it lingers. The city fades behind you like a dream at dawn. Dust gives way to dewy grass. Stone melts into softness. You're walking again, but slower now, like even your steps have decided to whisper. The path leads to a place you've never heard of, though your body seems to know the way. You arrive at a sanctuary small and half forgotten. Ivy strangles the walls and the gate squeaks in a way that feels oddly respectful. No tourists, no guards, just quiet. You've reached Epidaros, but not the grand showy version of it. Not the amphitheater where actors once roared in verse. This is the sacred side, the healing temple, the soft underbelly of ancient Greece where people came not to be seen, but to be soothed. You step into the main hall of the Asclepion. The air smells of olive oil, stone, and sleep. You lie on a stone slab just as pilgrims once did. Eyes closed, arms at your sides. The room hums gently with distant echoes. Somewhere, a reed pipe plays a song too slow to follow. You feel something move across your skin. Not wind, a snake. It glides across your forearm with the deliberate grace of someone reciting poetry in motion. Its scales are cool, dry, reassuring. It does not linger, but its trail remains. Not as a mark, but a memory. This is part of the healing. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In ancient Greek healing sanctuaries dedicated to Asclepius, patients would undergo a ritual called incubation, where they slept overnight in the temple hoping for divine dreams that revealed diagnoses or cures. Non-venomous snakes roamed freely among the dreamers, seen not as threats, but as agents of healing and prophecy. But what no guidebook tells you is that the snakes didn't act alone. They remembered. They passed things on, whispered messages between sleepers, transferred truths from one body to the next like sacred relay runners. And tonight, you're one of them, one of the dreamers, one of the whispered to. Your quirky tidbit. In the ruins of this very temple, archaeologists uncovered a carved stone fragment bearing no god's name but a coil, not Asclepius's rod, just a spiral, endless, coiling in on itself. Some dismissed it as decorative, others called it a maze, but a few they called it Ophion's signature. You drift into the edges of sleep and the snakes keep moving. Not many, just one or two at a time. Never hurried, never random. They move with purpose. They know. And now you begin to hear it. Not in your ears, in your dreams. A whisper so faint, so old it doesn't sound like words. It sounds like what language might have been before we decided on vowels. Let the body forget to guard itself. Let the mind forget it is alone. It could be your thought. Or it could be Ophion reaching in from the spaces between history. You don't wake, not yet. You hover, between dreams, between breaths, between what hurts and what heals. And for the first time in a very long time, you feel safe. You emerge from the dream slowly, like surfacing from warm water that didn't want to let you go. The air around you is quiet, but not empty. It crackles with presence. Something is about to begin, or maybe something is finally about to be remembered. You're in a courtyard, lit by torches that burn without smoke. Around you stand figures not gods, not mortals. People. Quiet ones. Heads bowed, eyes alert. Their robes are simple, their feet bare. Around their necks hang small carvings, spirals, coils, tiny snakes wrapped around twigs. They are the whispering ones. You've found them at last, or perhaps they've always been here simply waiting for someone who could hear. This is not a cult, not in the temple-burning, ecstatic, chanting way. There's no hierarchy, no high priest, no loud declarations, just a shared understanding some things are too important to shout. Tonight is a rare night, a gathering, not a rebellion, but a resonance. You watch as the group circles inward, each person stepping silently barefoot on stone. In the center, a low platform draped with moss. Upon it, not an idol, but a living serpent, curled loosely, watching, waiting. A woman steps forward. You recognize her, not her face exactly, but her stillness. It matches the girl from the cave, the ones from Lesbos. Maybe they're all part of the same coil, just different loops in time. She speaks, barely louder than breath. The coil must turn. The world forgets. We remember. Everyone repeats it, a whisper chorus. It's not eerie. It's comforting, like bedtime stories told by candlelight during a storm. Here's your mainstream historical fact. While rebellion in ancient Greece often took the form of armed uprisings or philosophical movements, quieter forms of resistance existed. Hidden religious gatherings, subversive poetry, secret rituals among women and slaves. These were revolutions of a different kind, not meant to be recorded but lived. Ophion didn't lead a battle. He led a remembering, a slow, slithering reclaiming of silence, not as retreat but as power. Now for the fringe detail. A set of terracotta figures unearthed in Phocis depict humanoid forms with snake heads, hands cupped to their mouths. The accompanying inscription reads, "They do not shout, but mountains bend." It's one of the few archaeological references that hint at a subterranean movement of silent influence. You walk among the whispering ones now. They don't ask your name. They don't ask anything. You already belong. They begin painting the stones with a thick, earthy pigment, symbols you recognize by feel more than memory. The coiled spiral, the river that runs backward, the eye that sleeps open. Then, with one collective breath, they stop. Look to the serpent, and wait. It lifts its head, hisses once. That's all. The circle dissolves like mist. Some leave through shadowed archways. Others vanish between trees. You are the last to rise. You touch the stone platform gently. It's warm. The snake is gone. You don't speak. You don't need to, because this is the slithering rebellion of quiet things, of those who carry truths too soft for parchment, who walk behind the noise, who hold a titan's whisper in their breath like a flame cupped against the wind. And tonight, you've become one of them. The world you step into now isn't made of stone or sky. It's made of memory. The colors are softer, like pigments rubbed from old cloth. The ground doesn't crunch or ripple. It simply accepts your weight as though it's been waiting for you. And everywhere around you, silence. Not the hollow kind, the sacred kind. The kind that holds its breath before a story ends. You're in a cave. Again, nor the cave. The first one, not the one with the girl and the snakes. This one is deeper, older. It doesn't belong to a place. It belongs to forgetting. It's the final place anyone saw Ophion. There's no path, no lights, just a cool pulse beneath your feet like a heartbeat slowed to a whisper. The air smells faintly of wet stone, time, and regret. You move inward. You don't carry a torch. The cave glows faintly from within. Not magic, just memory coiled tight into the walls. You run your hand along one. It feels like skin, or maybe just very old truth. Then you hear it. Not a whisper. Not this time. A breath. The cave exhales, and with it, a voice inside your head, not loud, not urgent. You came too late to remember me, but just in time to forget yourself. You pause, let that settle, because the voice isn't calling you. It's becoming you. Ophion the Titan, who whispered to snakes, the one too quiet for Olympus and too strange for scripture, he's not hiding here. He is here. Or, more precisely, he is becoming the cave, dissolving gently into storylessness. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In ancient Greek thought memory, Mnemosyne was itself divine. She was a titaness, the mother of the muses, the wellspring of all art and story. Forgetting, then, was not failure, it was transformation. To be forgotten wasn't always a tragedy. Sometimes it was transcendence. Ophion didn't lose his place in myth. He traded it. He shed it like a skin. Now, for your fringe detail. There exists a fragment from an unnamed Orphic hymn scrawled on a potsherd found in a Corinthian well. It reads, "He fell inward, became the hollow that holds echoes." Most assume it's metaphor. But you're standing in the literal version of it now. You step farther into the cave, though it doesn't feel like walking. It feels like agreeing. The walls narrow. The light fades not to black, but to a warm, mossy gray. Time bends here. You feel your own memories loosening, not disappearing, just relaxing, like even they don't want to speak too loudly. And then you reach the end, a chamber, round, smooth, with a single serpent coiled in the center asleep. You sit beside it. You don't need words, because here in the deepest hush, Ophion is not a figure. He is the stillness itself, the space between your thoughts, the breath before a lullaby. And if you listen closely, closer than you ever have, you can almost hear him fade, not with grief, but with grace. There's nothing left to follow. No footprints, no voices, no serpents slithering ahead to guide you. Just the hush. You're not walking now. You're floating, or rather being carried gently by the stillness Ophion left behind. It coils around you, not constricting, but holding, like a thought you forgot you had but can't quite let go of. And that's when you start to notice something strange. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of record. You strain your mind trying to recall scrolls, carvings, even oral tales that speak of Ophion clearly. Nothing. Only slivers. Coils in the margins, riddles and rituals, statues no one names. You've heard of heroes who fought giants, gods who loved mortals, even mortals who tricked gods. But a titan who whispered to snakes and walked away. No poet sang him, no playwright dramatized him, no empire named a temple in his honor. So you begin to ask why? Why didn't anyone write him down? The question doesn't come with thunder. It doesn't echo. It just lingers. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The writing of mythology in ancient Greece was political. It wasn't just storytelling, it was state-building. The gods and heroes who survived into canon were the ones that served a cultural purpose. They explained order justified power, gave the people an origin worth bragging about. There wasn't much room for vagueness, let alone vagabond titans who talked to snakes. And silence. Silence didn't build cities. It soothed them, tamed them, but no one built monuments to the hush after battle, only to the noise. So Ophion became inconvenient, a puzzle piece with no picture. Too soft to worship, too strange to hate. His story didn't end in punishment or glory, it just ended in ellipse. And now, for your fringe detail, a 19th century folklorist collecting rural Greek lullabies claimed to have heard a grandmother near Mount Pelion hum a song about the god who was never born and never died, who taught the serpents to dream. The melody was passed down, but the words dissolved with her voice. Historians still argue whether the song referred to an older, pre-Olympian figure, or if it was simply dream gibberish, a folk anomaly not worth archiving. But you know better now. You've walked where he walked, sat where he sat, whispered where he whispered, and slowly you begin to realize he was never meant to be remembered by name, because names can be erased, statues can be toppled, scrolls can burn, but whispers pass between breath and thought. They live in forgetting. And maybe, just maybe, that was Ophion's gift all along. Not power, not presence, but persistence. Not in history, in dreams. The last scene unfolds softly like parchment, unrolling in slow motion. You're not sure where you are now, not a place exactly. More like the shadow of one, a memory that hasn't quite chosen whether to stay or fade. There's a river. Still, narrow, so clear it doesn't reflect, it absorbs. Beside it, curled in the grass as if it never left, lies a single serpent. Its body loops into a perfect coil tail tucked under chin eyes closed. Not asleep, waiting. You kneel. It lifts its head just slightly, acknowledging you without surprise. Like it knew you'd come. Like this part was always yours. You don't speak. Neither does it. But something passes between you. A warmth, a quiet, a resonance. Like the low hum of a lullaby, long forgotten now resurfacing just for you. This is what Ophion left behind. Not temples, not scrolls. Just this, a knowing. A coil of memory wrapped so gently in silence that only someone listening with their whole body could hear it. The snake turns its head to the water. You follow its gaze. The river is lined with reeds, and between them, shapes, impressions, dreams of people who once almost remembered Ophion, a child sketching spirals in dust, a poet who dreamed of snakes and woke with ink-stained fingers, a nameless sculptor who carved a figure with no eyes, only open ears. They were all touched by something soft, something unwritten. Here's your final mainstream historical fact. In nearly every surviving Greek myth, the characters who survive are the ones who act loudly, violently, or cleverly. Those who observe, who guide gently, or fade away without spectacle, tend to vanish from the records, not because they weren't important, but because they weren't convenient. And now, your last fringe detail. On a cave wall in Thessaly, deep beneath an abandoned shrine, there's a spiral carved so deeply into the stone that its edge remains warm to the touch. No one's claimed it, but local legend says it marks where a whisper once turned into the world. You stand now. The snake does not move. It simply waits for what you're not sure. Maybe for Ophion, maybe for you, or maybe for someone else entirely. Someone who will pass this whisper forward, not in words, but in presence. In the way they walk through the world a little slower, a little softer, a little more like something coiled not to strike but to listen. You touch the water. It ripples once, and the snake finally exhales. It's not a sound, it's a permission. To let go, to carry the silence forward, to remember gently, and now the whisper fades. You're still here, but softer somehow. Slower. Your breath aligns with something older than time, and even the silence around you feels warmer. The serpent by the river curls back into its coil content. The reeds sigh. The stars above don't sparkle, they rest. You've walked a path most people never find. A path that doesn't shout, doesn't demand, just waits. And in that waiting, in that hush, something ancient stirred, not to wake, but to welcome. So as your body sinks deeper into stillness, and your thoughts begin to blur at the edges, let this last image stay with you. A titan who whispered, a serpent who remembered, and a river that absorbed stories instead of reflecting them. There is no epilogue, no final battle. Just you and a soft truth coiled in the dark, humming gently in the folds of your sleep. Let that coil hold you now. Let your breathing slow. Let your mind wander untethered by fact or legend, floating freely in the space Ophion left behind. You are not forgotten. You are simply still. Good night.